Ji-woo stepped off the transport shuttle and felt her stomach twist with nervousness. The station stretched out before her like a massive metal city floating in space. Nexus 7 was bigger than anything she had ever seen. The walls curved upward in impossible angles, and beings of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors like a river of strange colors and sounds. She was small even for a human. Back on Earth, people sometimes mistook her for younger than her 24 years. Here, surrounded by aliens who towered over her, she felt like a child lost in a crowd of giants. A creature with blue scales and 4 arms walked past, its head nearly touching the ceiling. Ji-woo had to press herself against the wall to avoid being stepped on. "You must be Ji-woo." A familiar voice cut through her panic. She turned to see Tae-min, the station administrator, who had interviewed her months ago. He was human. And seeing another person from Earth made her shoulders relax slightly. "Yes, sir." Reporting for duty as cultural liaison officer. She tried to sound confident, but her voice came out smaller than she intended. Tae-min smiled kindly. He was older, maybe in his 40s, with graying hair and tired eyes. "No need for formalities. We're all just trying to survive out here together. Come on. I'll show you to your quarters and give you the tour." As they walked through the station, Tae-min explained how things worked. Nexus 7 was home to 43 different species. Each had their own customs, languages, and ways of living. The Galactic Federation had built the station as a place where everyone could work together. Humans were the newest members, still proving they belonged. "Some species have been here for hundreds of years," Tae-min said as they passed a group of insect-like creatures clicking to each other. "We've only been part of the Federation for 5 years. Many still see us as outsiders." Ji-woo nodded. She had studied this before coming. Humans were considered weak by galactic standards. They were small, soft, and broke easily. They couldn't breathe methane like the Sulfurians, or survive in vacuum like the crystalline. They needed constant food, water, and the right temperature. High maintenance, some aliens called them. Her quarters were tiny but clean. A bed, a desk, a small bathroom. The walls were gray metal, cold and unwelcoming. Tae-min told her to rest, and tomorrow her real work would begin. That night, Ji-woo couldn't sleep. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother had cried when she left. Her father had hugged her tight and told her to make humanity proud. The weight of that responsibility felt heavy on her chest. The next morning, she met Hyun-soo and Da-eun. They were the only other humans in her department. Hyun-soo worked in engineering, fixing the complicated systems that kept the station running. He was cheerful and made jokes to hide his own nervousness. Da-eun was a medical officer, serious and focused. She had been on the station for 6 months already. "The key is to keep your head down and do good work," Da-eun advised over breakfast in the human quarters. "Don't give them any reason to doubt us. But don't be invisible either," Hyun-soo added. "We need to show we can handle whatever they throw at us." Ji-woo absorbed their advice like a sponge. She wanted desperately to succeed, not just for herself, but for all of humanity. Every human on the station carried the weight of their entire species on their shoulders. Her first real test came during the orientation meeting. She sat in a large conference room, surrounded by beings from a dozen different species. The chairs were too big for her, and her feet didn't touch the ground. A massive reptilian creature sat across from her. His scales were dark green, and his eyes were yellow with vertical pupils. His badge identified him as Vrektal, Chief of Station Security. The meeting covered basic protocols and safety procedures. Ji-woo tried to pay attention, but she felt Vrektal's eyes on her several times. His gaze wasn't hostile exactly, but it was measuring, judging, finding her lacking. After the meeting, she was introduced to her workstation. Her job was to help different species communicate and understand each other. When conflicts arose from cultural misunderstandings, she would mediate. It required knowledge, patience, and the ability to see things from multiple perspectives. On her third day, she noticed the cubs. Two young Kravoth, the same species as Vrektal, were playing near the observation deck. They were smaller than the adults, but still twice Jiwoo's size. Their scales were lighter, almost green gold, and their movements were clumsy and playful. They chased each other, making chirping sounds that might have been laughter. One of them crashed into a railing and fell. Jiwoo rushed over without thinking. "Are you hurt?" The young Kravoth looked up at her with wide yellow eyes. Up close, she could see he was just a child. Maybe the equivalent of 8 or 9 years old, in human terms. "I'm fine," he said in halting standard Galactic. "You're the human. The new one." "Yes. My name is Jiwoo. I'm Nurix. That's my sister Kelix." He pointed to the other young Kravoth, who was watching curiously from a few feet away. "Nice to meet you both." Jiwoo smiled, and the cubs seemed to relax. "You're very small," Kelix observed. Not rudely, but with genuine curiosity. "How do you reach things?" "One," Jiwoo laughed. "Very carefully. And sometimes I ask for help." The cubs seemed satisfied with this answer. They ran off together, their tails swishing behind them. Jiwoo watched them go, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. At least the children weren't judging her yet. That evening, Taemin found her in the corridor. "I hear you met Vrektal's children. They seemed nice." "They are. Young ones usually are. It's the adults you need to worry about." His expression grew serious. "Tomorrow is your first communal meal in the central refectory. All station personnel eat together. It's tradition." "Is that a problem?" Taemin hesitated. "Just be prepared. The portions are calibrated for each species. Human portions are smaller than most. Some of the other species find it amusing." Jiwoo felt her stomach drop. "I can handle it. I know you can. Just remember why you're here. You're representing all of us." That night, Jiwoo lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be another test. Another chance to prove herself. She was tired of always having to prove herself, but she understood why it was necessary. Humanity was the newcomer, in a galaxy of ancient civilizations. They had to earn their place. She thought of Nurix and Kelix, those curious young cubs. At least some beings on this station were willing to see her as a person, not just a small, weak human. That would have to be enough for now. Sleep finally came, but her dreams were filled with giants and endless corridors where she could never find her way. The central refectory was enormous. Jiwoo stood in the entrance and felt her courage wavering. The ceiling stretched up 3 stories high, and the room was filled with hundreds of tables of different sizes and shapes. The air was thick with dozens of smells, some pleasant, and others that made her nose wrinkle. Creatures of every type filled the space with sounds, a mixture of clicks, roars, whistles, and humming. She took a deep breath and walked toward the serving area. The system was automated. You placed your hand on a scanner, and it identified your species and gave you the appropriate portion. Jiwoo had been told this was efficient and fair. Each species received exactly what their biology required. She pressed her hand to the scanner. A green light blinked. A moment later, a tray slid out from the wall. On it was a small plate with what looked like protein cubes, some kind of vegetable paste, and a piece of bread. A cup of water sat beside it. The portions looked reasonable to Jiwoo, similar to what she might eat at home. Then she looked around at the other trays. A Grithian next to her received a plate piled high with what looked like crystallized minerals. The stack was taller than Jiwoo's head. A Kravoth behind her got a massive portion of raw meat, still dripping, that must have weighed 15 pounds. Her small tray suddenly looked tiny. Pathetic. "Move along, human." The voice behind her was deep and rumbling. She turned to see Vrektal, the security chief. His yellow eyes flicked to her tray, and his mouth opened slightly. Was that a smile? It looked more like a predator baring teeth. Jiwoo moved quickly to find a seat. She spotted Hyunsu and Da-un, at a table in the corner, and headed toward them. But Vrektal's voice boomed across the refectory. Look at the human's portion. Barely enough to feed a hatchling. The massive room didn't go silent, but a noticeable number of beings turned to look. Jiwoo felt heat flood her face. She kept walking, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. How does such a creature survive? Vrektal continued, speaking to the other security officers around him. Do they eat constantly like scavengers? Or are they simply that inefficient? Laughter rippled through the security section. Not cruel laughter exactly, but dismissive. The kind of laughter that came from seeing something small and ridiculous. Jiwoo reached the table and sat down carefully, setting her tray down with shaking hands. Ignore him, Da-eun said quietly, her jaw tight with anger. He's an idiot. He's the chief of security, Jiwoo whispered back. I can't afford to make an enemy of him. Hyun-soo picked at his own small portion. Welcome to station life. We get this at least once a week. You learn to tune it out. But Jiwoo couldn't tune it out. She felt dozens of eyes on her. Some curious, some amused, some pitying. She picked up her utensils and began to eat slowly. The food was bland, but edible. She chewed each bite carefully, deliberately. She would not rush. She would not show that his words had hurt her. Across the room, Vrektal was still talking. His voice carried easily over the ambient noise. The Federation grows soft, allowing such fragile species to join. What can these humans contribute? They cannot fight. They cannot survive harsh environments. They need constant care. Like younglings, some of the beings around him nodded. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Jiwoo focused on her plate. Each bite felt like swallowing stones. She wanted to stand up and shout that humans had value. That size didn't matter. That they had survived and thrived on a harsh world, and built civilizations that reached the stars. But she didn't. She sat quietly and ate her small meal. From another part of the refectory, she caught movement. The Kravoth cubs, Nurix and Kelix, were sitting with what must be their mother. Their large table was piled with food, but they weren't eating. They were watching Jiwoo with those wide yellow eyes. Their heads tilted in that curious way children have when they're trying to understand something confusing. Why is she eating alone? Nurix asked his mother, his voice carrying in that way children's voices do when they don't understand about indoor volume. Their mother, a female Kravoth with lighter scales, glanced over. She's not alone. She's with her own kind. But there are only 3 of them. And that big Kravoth was mean to her. Nurix, eat your food. It's not our concern. But the cub continued to watch. Kelix leaned over to her brother and whispered something Jiwoo couldn't hear. They were talking about her. Planning something. Maybe. Or maybe just observing the strange new species on the station. Jiwoo finished her meal. It had taken her 15 minutes, and every minute had felt like an hour. She stood up carefully, picked up her tray, and walked it to the recycling station. She kept her head high and her back straight. She would not let them see her cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. As she passed Vrektal's table, he spoke again. At least the human has manners. Small portions for small beings. Appropriate. More laughter. Jiwoo's hands clenched around her empty tray, but she kept walking. She deposited the tray, turned, and walked out of the refectory. She didn't run. She didn't hurry. She walked with as much dignity as she could manage. Once she was in the corridor, away from prying eyes, she leaned against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes. Tears threatened, but she forced them back. Crying wouldn't help. It would only confirm what they already thought about humans. That they were weak, emotional, unable to handle the realities of galactic society. That was brave. Taemin's voice made her jump. He had followed her out. Walking through that, with your head held high. That took real courage. It didn't feel brave. It felt humiliating. Bravery often does. He stood beside her, looking back toward the refectory. Vrektal is testing you. He tests all the humans. He wants to see if we'll break or fight back or complain. What should I do? What you just did. Keep your dignity. Do your job better than anyone else. Prove him wrong through actions, not words. Taemin paused. The cubs were watching you. You know, Narix and Kelix. I saw them. I noticed. Young ones see things adults miss. They don't have prejudices yet. They just have curiosity. He patted her shoulder awkwardly. Get some rest. Tomorrow is another day. Ji-woo returned to her quarters. She showered and changed into her sleep clothes. She lay in bed and stared at the ceiling again. The humiliation burned in her chest like acid, but underneath it, she felt something else. Determination. Anger, maybe. A stubborn refusal to let them define her by her size. She thought about what Taemin had said. Prove them wrong through actions. That's what she would do. She would work harder than anyone. She would be so good at her job that they couldn't ignore her. She would earn their respect, even if it killed her. Sleep came slowly. But when it did, she dreamed not of giants but of standing tall, of being seen for who she truly was, rather than what she looked like. In her dreams, even the mighty Vrektal had to admit she had value. Morning would come soon enough, and with it, another chance to prove herself. Days turned into weeks. Ji-woo threw herself into her work with fierce determination. She studied every species on the station until she could recognize their customs and communication styles instantly. She mediated disputes between the Sulfurians and the Grithians over atmospheric controls. She helped translate complex technical manuals for species whose languages didn't have words for certain human concepts. She was good at her job. Really good. But the whispers followed her everywhere. The fragile human. The small one. The species that needed special accommodations just to survive. 3 weeks after the refectory incident, everything changed. It started with an alarm. Red lights flashed through the corridors, and a mechanical voice announced a maintenance emergency in Sector 7. Ji-woo was at her workstation when Hyun-soo burst in, his face pale. There's been a collapse in the maintenance shaft. A Grithian worker is trapped. Ji-woo ran with him to the emergency command center. A crowd had already gathered. On the screen, they could see the trapped worker, an insectoid being with 6 legs and translucent wings. Debris had fallen, blocking the main passage. The Grithian was making distressed clicking sounds. We need to get someone in there, the shift commander said. He was a massive Kravoth, not Vrektal but someone from his security team. The support beams are unstable. Another collapse could happen any moment. I'll go. A large volunteer stepped forward, but the engineer shook his head. The passage is too narrow. After the collapse, only about 60 centimeters wide. Anyone too large will cause more debris to fall. 60 centimeters. Ji-woo did the math in her head. That was tight, even for a human. But she was small. Smaller than most. I can fit. Her voice cut through the discussion. Everyone turned to stare at her. The shift commander's expression was skeptical. It requires someone small enough to fit through the gap without causing another collapse. Ji-woo stepped forward, her heart pounding. I've studied Grithian communication protocols. I can talk to him, keep him calm, guide him out. It's dangerous. Yes, but he'll die if someone doesn't try. There was a long pause. The shift commander looked at the screen, then back at Ji-woo. Finally, he nodded. Get her safety equipment. They fitted her with a light harness and a communication device. Hyun-soo helped her check the straps, his hands shaking slightly. Be careful, he whispered. Always am. The maintenance shaft was dark and smelled like burnt metal. Ji-woo crawled through the access tunnel on her hands and knees. The passage was tight, claustrophobic. Jagged edges of broken metal scraped against her suit. Behind her, She could hear the security team monitoring her progress through the comm link. 30 meters to the collapse site, someone said in her ear. She kept crawling. Her knees hurt. Her hands hurt. But she pushed forward. Finally, she reached the debris field. In the dim light from her helmet, she could see the narrow gap. It looked even smaller in person. "I'm going through," she announced. "Careful. The structure is unstable." Ji-woo took a deep breath and squeezed into the gap. Metal pressed against her from both sides. She had to exhale completely to make herself small enough. For a moment, panic seized her. What if she got stuck? What if the whole thing collapsed on top of her? But then she heard the Grithians clicking from the other side. Frightened, in pain, she pushed forward, ignoring the scraping against her suit, ignoring the fear. Centimeter by centimeter, she made it through. On the other side, the Grithian worker looked up at her with multifaceted eyes. "Human? Yes. My name is Ji-woo. I'm here to help." She switched to the Grithian language, using the clicking sounds she had practiced. "Are you injured?" "My leg. Crushed." The Grithian's voice was strained. Ji-woo examined the situation. A beam had fallen across one of the Grithian's legs. She couldn't lift it, but she could see the leg wasn't completely trapped. "I need you to trust me. When I count to 3, you're going to pull your leg back as hard as you can. I'll guide you. Can you do that?" "Yes. 1, 2, 3. The Grithian pulled. Ji-woo used her small hands to guide the leg around the beam, angling it just right. With a sickening crunch, it came free. The Grithian let out a cry of pain, but was free. "Now we move. Slowly. I'll go first and talk you through every step." For the next 20 minutes, Ji-woo guided the injured Grithian through the collapse zone. She described every obstacle, warned about every unstable section, kept her voice calm and steady, even though her heart was racing. Behind her, the Grithian followed, moving awkwardly with his injured leg but trusting her completely. When they finally emerged into the wider corridor, the entire emergency team was waiting. Medical personnel rushed forward to help the Grithian. Hyun-soo pulled Ji-woo into a hug so tight she couldn't breathe. "You did it. You crazy, brave human. You did it." The shift commander approached. He looked down at Ji-woo, his expression unreadable. Then, he placed a clawed hand on her shoulder. "Well done, Liaison Ji-woo. Very well done. Vendor, Averwell. Venderwell." Word spread through the station like wildfire. The small human had crawled into a collapsed shaft and saved a Grithian worker. She had fit where no one else could. She had used her size as an advantage, not a weakness. That evening, Ji-woo was exhausted. She had scrapes and bruises all over her body. But when she entered the refectory for dinner, something was different. Beings nodded to her as she passed. A few even moved aside to give her more room. She got her small portion, same as always. But when she sat down, she didn't feel the weight of judgment anymore. She had proven something today. Not that humans were strong or large or powerful, but that they were useful. That they had value. Across the room, Nurix and Kelix were watching again. But this time, when Ji-woo caught their gaze, they both chirped happily and waved their clawed hands at her. She smiled and waved back. Their mother leaned down and said something to them. Both cubs nodded eagerly. They seemed excited about something, whispering to each other, and glancing in Ji-woo's direction. Even Vrektal was there, sitting with his security team. He didn't say anything when Ji-woo entered. He just watched her with those calculating yellow eyes. She couldn't tell what he was thinking. But at least, he wasn't laughing anymore. Ji-woo ate her meal slowly, savoring each bite. Not because she was self-conscious, but because she was genuinely tired and hungry. Her body ached, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in weeks. Da-eun leaned over. "I heard what you did today. The whole station is talking about it. I just did what needed to be done. You were brave. You proved that size doesn't matter when you have courage and skill. Jiwoo shrugged. But inside, warmth bloomed in her chest. Maybe she was starting to earn her place here. Maybe humanity was starting to earn its place in the galaxy. One small action at a time. The station alarm woke everyone at 0600 hours. Jiwoo jolted upright in bed, her heart racing. The mechanical voice announced a mandatory emergency drill. All personnel were to report to their designated positions immediately. She dressed quickly and rushed to her station in the Civilian Coordination Center. Her job during emergencies was to help evacuate non-essential personnel and ensure all species understood the protocols. It sounded simple, but in practice, it was chaos. The drill simulated a catastrophic hull breach in the residential sectors. Thousands of beings needed to evacuate to the emergency shelters in under 30 minutes. Jiwoo stood at her console, coordinating with dozens of team leaders across the station. Sector 4, you have sulfurians who can't move through standard corridors. Reroute them through the industrial passages. Sector 9, the crystalline can survive in vacuum for short periods. Move them last. Prioritize oxygen breathers. Medical team, we have several pregnant beings in Sector 12. They need priority escort. Her voice was calm and clear. She had studied every species, every corridor, every emergency protocol. She knew this station better than she knew her own home back on Earth. Her fingers flew across the console, tracking every group, solving every problem that arose. The Grithians were panicking in Sector 7, their translator malfunctioning. Jiwoo switched to their clicking language, speaking directly to their team leader. She calmed them down and guided them to safety. A group of Kravoth younglings got separated from their teacher in Sector 3. Jiwoo dispatched a security team and rerouted them through a maintenance passage that would be safer for the small ones. 28 minutes into the drill, the last civilian reached the emergency shelters. The station commander's voice came over the comm. All clear. Drill. Completed successfully. 0 casualties. Excellent work, everyone. Jiwoo slumped in her chair. Exhausted. Her throat was raw from talking. Her hands trembled from the adrenaline. But they had done it. Everyone was safe. Taemin appeared at her station. That was incredible. You coordinated that entire evacuation almost single-handedly. It's my job. It's more than your job. You saved lives today. If this had been a real emergency, your quick thinking and coordination would have made the difference between 0 casualties and dozens dead. Other team members came by to congratulate her. A Grithian she had helped touched her shoulder with one of his legs, a sign of deep respect in their culture. Even beings from other departments stopped to nod at her. By the time Jiwoo made it to the refectory that evening, she was so tired she could barely walk. Her body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She collected her small portion mechanically, not even registering what food was on her plate. She found an empty table in a quieter corner and sat down heavily. She just wanted to eat quickly and go back to her quarters to sleep. But before she could take her first bite, she heard small footsteps approaching. Nurix and Kelix stood beside her table, each carrying their massive portions. The plates were piled high with meat and vegetables, portions designed for growing Kravoth bodies. Hello, Jiwoo said, trying to muster a smile despite her exhaustion. Is everything okay? Nurix didn't answer with words. Instead, he carefully picked up a large piece of meat from his plate and placed it on Jiwoo's. Kelix did the same, adding vegetables and what looked like some kind of grain. What are you doing? Jiwoo asked, confused. You worked the hardest today. Nurix said simply. Mother says beings who work hard need more energy. Your portion is too small for what you did. When? Mother said. Mother said. I see. Mother said. That's very kind. But I can't. Please, Kelix interrupted. You saved people. You talked for hours. You didn't even stop to eat. You need more food. Jiwoo felt her throat tighten with emotion. These cubs, these children, had been paying attention. They had seen what she did. They understood. Before she could respond, other young beings started approaching. A young Grithian placed some of his crystallized minerals on her plate. A Sulfurian cub added something that looked like purple fruit. More came, one after another, each adding something from their portions. "You helped my parent during the drill," one said. "You spoke our language when we were scared," said another. "You made sure everyone was safe." Within minutes, Jiwoo's table was piled high with food. Her small plate couldn't hold it all. Beings were stacking food beside it, around it, creating a mountain of offerings. She stared at it all, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't help it. The kindness was overwhelming. The refectory had gone quiet. Every being in the massive room was watching. Adult aliens stared at the scene with expressions ranging from surprise to contemplation. Some looked uncomfortable, as if the cubs were revealing something the adults had chosen to ignore. "Size of stomach does not match size of heart," Kelix announced loudly, her young voice carrying through the silence. "The human is small, but her heart is big. She deserves big food too." Nurix nodded vigorously. "Father says she is too small to be useful, but she fit where he could not. She spoke languages he cannot. She saved the Grithian. She saved everyone today. Father is wrong." Jiwoo looked up and saw Vrektal standing near the security tables. His expression was frozen, unreadable. His own children had just publicly called him wrong. The mighty security chief, corrected by cubs. The adult beings started murmuring. Some nodded slowly. Others whispered to their companions. A shift was happening, something fundamental changing in how they saw the small human sitting surrounded by mountains of food she couldn't possibly eat. Jiwoo wiped her eyes and looked at all the young faces around her. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Thank you all so much. But I can't eat all this food. My stomach really is smaller than yours." "Then take what you need," Nurix said. "Share the rest with your friends. But know that we see you. We see what you do. Size does not matter when someone has courage." The cubs dispersed back to their families. Jiwoo looked down at the absurd amount of food on her table. She started laughing through her tears. It was too much, completely ridiculous, absolutely impossible to eat. But it was the most beautiful gift she had ever received. Hyunsu and Da-eun rushed over, their faces showing shock and joy. "What just happened?" Hyunsu asked. "I think," Jiwoo said slowly, "the children just taught everyone a lesson about generosity and respect." Taemin appeared beside the table, smiling widely. "I've been on this station for 3 years. I've never seen anything like this. Those cubs just changed everything." Jiwoo looked across the refectory at Vrektal. He was still standing there, watching. For the first time since she arrived, his expression wasn't one of dismissal or judgment. He looked thoughtful, maybe even a little ashamed. She picked up a piece of meat from the pile, one that Nurix had given her, and took a bite. It was delicious. But more than that, it tasted like acceptance, like belonging, like home. The refectory slowly returned to normal noise levels. But something had changed in the air. Something important. The small human wasn't just an oddity anymore. She was one of them, a member of the station community, proven through action and recognized through the innocent wisdom of children. Jiwoo ate what she could and shared the rest with Hyunsu and Da-eun. They made jokes about having enough food to last a week. But underneath the humor, they all felt it. This was a turning point, not just for Jiwoo, but for all humans on the station. The cubs had opened a door, and it could never be closed again. The story of the cubs and the food became station legend within days. Everyone talked about it. Some praised the young ones for their kindness. Others debated whether humans really deserved such recognition, but no one could ignore it. The small human had been honored by the children of dozens of species, and that meant something. Ji-woo continued her work as always. She didn't expect special treatment, and didn't ask for it, but she noticed changes everywhere. Beings nodded to her in corridors. Some stopped to ask her questions about human culture. A few even sought her out specifically to mediate their disputes, trusting her judgment over others. 2 weeks after the cub's gesture, a crisis erupted. Two aggressive species, the Vorthan and the Mechril, had been arguing over resource allocation for months. Their representatives finally snapped during a routine meeting. The Vorthan ambassador threatened violence. The Mechril representative responded by displaying weapons. The station commander called an emergency mediation session. To everyone's surprise, both ambassadors requested Ji-woo as the mediator. Not the senior diplomatic corps, not the species-neutral AI system, the small human. The mediation took place in a secure conference room. Vrektal was assigned to provide security, along with 4 other guards. Ji-woo sat at the head of the table, looking impossibly tiny between the two massive alien representatives. The Vorthan leaned forward, his multiple eyes glaring. "Your kind are newcomers. Why should we trust your judgment?" Ji-woo met his gaze calmly. "Because I have no stake in your dispute. I don't care who gets more resources. I only care that we find a solution that lets both of you survive and thrive." "We will not yield," the Mechril said, his armored plates rattling with agitation. "I'm not asking you to yield. I'm asking you to think." Ji-woo pulled up data on her tablet. "You've been fighting over mining rights in Sector 47, but my analysis shows that sector has 2 distinct resource deposits. One is rich in the metals your people need, Vorthan. The other contains crystals valuable to the Mechril. You're fighting over the same space when you actually want different things." Both representatives leaned forward to look at the data. Their expressions shifted from anger to interest. "If we divide the sector along these geological lines," Ji-woo continued, drawing on the screen, "you each get what you actually need. No compromise necessary. You're not sharing resources. You're separating them." The Vorthan's eyes narrowed. "Why did our own analysts not see this?" "Because they were looking for reasons to fight, not reasons to cooperate. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see obvious solutions." For 3 hours, Ji-woo worked with both sides. She answered every objection, solved every problem, found compromise where they insisted none existed. She never raised her voice. She never showed frustration. She just kept working, kept finding solutions, kept bringing them back to the core issue. At one point, the Mechril ambassador became aggressive again, standing up suddenly and looming over the table. His species was known for violence when angered. The security team tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Ji-woo didn't flinch. She looked up at the massive alien, her face calm. "Sit down, Ambassador. Violence won't solve this. Violence never solves this. You know that. That's why you asked for me." The Mechril stared at her. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then, slowly, he sat down. "You are brave. For such a small being. Bravery has nothing to do with size." They reached an agreement 2 hours later. Both ambassadors signed the treaty, neither fully happy, but both acknowledging the solution was fair. As they left, the Vorthan stopped beside Ji-woo. "You have earned respect today, human. From both our peoples." When the room emptied, only Ji-woo and Vrektal remained. The security chief had watched the entire mediation from his post by the door. Now, he walked over to where Ji-woo was gathering her materials. "That was well done," he said gruffly. "Thank you. I owe you an apology." The words seemed difficult for him. "When you first arrived, I judged you by your size. I assumed your small stature meant small capability. I was wrong." Ji-woo looked up at him. "You were doing what everyone does, making assumptions based on appearance. But yes, you were wrong. My cubs taught me something I should have known. They saw what I could not." He paused, struggling with the words. You have proven yourself many times over. You are worthy of respect. Your species is worthy of respect. We always were, Jiwoo said quietly. We just needed time to show it. Vrektal nodded slowly. I will make sure my security team understands this. No more mockery. No more dismissal. No. No. I appreciate that. That evening, Jiwoo entered the refectory for dinner. She went through the serving line and collected her small portion. Same as always. She didn't mind anymore. This was what her body needed, and that was enough. She looked around for a place to sit and saw Nurix and Kelix waving at her from across the room. They were sitting with their family at a large table. Their mother gestured for Jiwoo to join them. As Jiwoo walked over, she heard a familiar deep voice. Liaison Jiwoo. She turned to see Vrektal. He was holding a tray with an extra portion of food. I thought you might need additional energy after today's mediation. It was difficult work. Jiwoo smiled. Thank you, Chief Vrektal. That's very thoughtful. He set the extra portion at the family table and gestured for her to sit. She did, settling between the two cubs, who chirped happily at her presence. Hyun-soo, Da-eun, and Taemin saw what was happening and came over to join them. The table filled with humans and Kravath, different sizes and shapes, all sharing a meal together. Other beings in the refectory noticed. Conversations paused. Eyes turned toward the unusual group. Then, slowly, something remarkable happened. Other species started doing the same thing. Mixed groups formed at tables throughout the refectory. Agrithians sat with Sulfurians. Young beings from different worlds shared food and stories. The invisible walls that had divided the room for so long began to crumble. Nurix leaned against Jiwoo's shoulder. Are you happy here now? Jiwoo thought about the question. When she had first arrived, she had felt small and unwelcome. Every day had been a struggle to prove herself. But now, surrounded by friends of all species, she felt something different. Yes, she said honestly. I'm happy here. Good. Kelix reached over and patted Jiwoo's hand with her large claw, very gently. You belong here. Size doesn't matter. What matters is inside. Vrektal looked at his daughter, then at Jiwoo. Something like pride crossed his face. Not pride in being right, but pride in being corrected by someone wiser than himself, even if that someone was a child. As they ate together, Jiwoo realized something profound. She hadn't changed the station by being the strongest or the loudest. She had changed it by being exactly who she was, by doing her job with skill and compassion, by refusing to let others define her worth, by showing up every day and proving through actions that humanity had a place among the stars. The cubs had seen it first because children always see the truth before adults learn to ignore it. They had acted with simple generosity, piling food on her plate. And in doing so, they had forced everyone else to question their assumptions. Size didn't matter. Strength came in many forms, and sometimes the smallest voice carried the most important message. Jiwoo looked around the refectory at the mixing species, at the walls breaking down, at the future being built one shared meal at a time. This was what humanity brought to the galaxy. Not physical dominance, but the ability to bridge differences, to find common ground, to bring people together. She took a bite of food, and it tasted like victory. Not the victory of conquest, but the victory of acceptance, of belonging, of home. Taemin raised his cup. To Jiwoo, to humanity, to proving that we all have value, regardless of size. The table echoed the toast. Even Vrektal raised his cup, his yellow eyes meeting Jiwoo's with genuine respect. She smiled and raised her own cup. To the cubs who taught us all to see clearly, and to every being who chooses kindness over judgment, they drank together. Different species united by simple truth. In the vastness of space, on a station filled with thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds, one small human had found her place. not by changing who she was, but by showing everyone else that their assumptions about size and strength and value were wrong. The galaxy was big, but so was she. Not in body, but in heart. And in the end, that was all that mattered.